Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. If Numbers Could Talk is a part of the Thinkering group. You can find us over at thinkering.space. You can also find at Thinkering Space the Thinkering Talks podcast, the Exofathom podcast, along with the Plank Talks with Joe. When you get a chance, please check out our merchandise. We have merchandise on our website, thinkering.space, as well as merchandise at teespring.com/thinkering shop. Please visit, grab a t-shirt, grab a mug. We'll appreciate it. And when you do, feel free to let us know that you've decided to become a member of any of our fan clubs. And we are now with you. I apologize to anyone who has been tuned in for the last 3 minutes. I was under the impression that my audio was playing behind the layover. So I want to apologize for anyone who's been tuning in. I also want to recap what I've been saying and what you've been missing. So today's episode is going to be NFL based. It's going to be targeted around 2 wide receivers. One wide receiver some considers the GOAT. One wide receiver some considers the greatest wide receiver of all time. The other wide receiver, I think these are the 1 and 2 as far as notoriety is concerned for sure. I have the second receiver in my top 3. Some have him in their top 5. Some have him in their top 10, depending on numbers and or if you watched him play or if you cared for his playing style. The 2 wide receivers I'm talking about today are NFL Hall of Famer Jerry Rice and NFL Hall of Famer Randy Moss. Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. Now, as I said, if you have ever had the chance or the time for yourself to watch these gentlemen play, you may not have rooted for them if they weren't on your team. Not many people root for guys that are beating them. You know what I mean? But aside from the emotional side, I don't think anyone can ever say that either of these gentlemen are not high quality athletes. I don't think anyone can say that either of these gentlemen aren't worth the talk, that they're not worth the notoriety they get, that they're not worth both being Hall of Famers. So let's get into the numbers, let's get into the facts, and let's get into some understanding as to why Randy Moss is sometimes not considered the number 2 or one of the greatest receivers of all time, but why Jerry Rice, every single discussion, is considered the greatest receiver of all time. This, again, will not be a comparison today. It will be more of a follow in. One guy came, the other guy came. The jobs were amazing. The production, this is another one of those comparisons, just like one of my other football comparisons, where you basically have guys that were almost two opposite ends of the spectrum. These guys were not playing similar, but they do play the exact same position, and the results, amazing, just amazing. So I'm going to begin with the senior of our situation. I do not say senior in a bad way. I truly believe that this gentleman could probably still be playing today. Well, not today, but he could have been playing at the early part of this. No, actually, I'm going to stick with what I was saying. I think he could probably be playing today as a slot or something of that nature, right? A flex, maybe. Nah, he might have to go across the middle too much. But the other gentleman, I'm not quite sure why he retired, if I'm being honest. I know there were a little, small injuries coming down at the end. However, I can't really say what made Randy Moss walk away from the game. But what I can say is I was glad to watch it, man. So, again, I'm going to begin with our elder statesman, Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice had a 20-season NFL career. He was drafted in 1985, first round, 16 pick by the San Francisco 49ers. He was 6'2" and weighed 200 pounds for his playing career. Randy Moss had a 14-year playing career. He was drafted in 1998, first round, 21st pick to the Minnesota Vikings. Randy Moss was listed at 6'4", 215 pounds. These guys weren't even built the same. If you understand football and you understand receivers like Randy Moss, especially back then, it really wasn't a thing. Like, you had your larger receivers. You always have taller receivers, faster receivers, your smaller guys. The smaller guys typically, they get more notoriety. I mean, the bigger guys, they make some really amazing catches, but the smaller guys are going to get into the openings earlier. Their routes are just going to be sometimes much more complex, which is going to get them open. And football is about moving the chains. Football's not always about a home run play. It's about moving the chains. The bigger receivers are your home run guys, right? So let's start with the year that these gentlemen were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Jerry Rice was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2010. Randy Moss was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2018. Neither of these gentlemen, I don't think, had to wait more than, I don't think they waited more than 5 years, either one of them, to get in to the Hall of Fame. They were done playing, and it was like, hey, that guy is a Hall of Famer, and it wasn't a question. It was never a question. And if you ask me, the reason it was never a question is you don't have, let me make sure I phrase this properly. You don't have guys who people are considering for Hall of Fame before they exit the league and then they don't make it almost immediately. It's just not exactly how that works. Typically, if a guy is getting all of those accolades, all of these, everyone's talking so great about them, you don't need the numbers to tell you that that person deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. A lot of guys in the Hall of Fame, if you ask me, they simply pass the eye test. They just pass the eye test, and the eye test is very simple. Can you hack it? I'm going to put you on the field amongst a bunch of guys who their job is to stop you and or their job is to continue watching you. The guys whose job it is to watch you, they're not on the field. The guys whose job it is to stop you, you might want to have your eyes open. And you don't make it to the Hall of Fame, in my humble opinion, you do not make it to the Hall of Fame, and you do not make it with guys talking about how great you were while you were still playing, with guys talking about, hey, when do you think this guy's going to the Hall of Fame, while you're playing, and you don't go nearly immediately. All right. So let's get this very, very clear. Neither of these guys should be considered anything less than great. I'm saying that now as I begin, just at the top of the rundown. Hall of Fame players, they were both insanely talented. They were both insanely productive. If you ask me, the only reason some don't like Randy versus Jerry, it's not the numbers. We're going to get to those. It's not the numbers. Some think, or some say, guys like Randy and T.O. and Ocho Cinco, Chad Johnson, some people say that these guys changed the game for worse. Now, if you watch today's NFL, there's no way that these guys changed the game for worse. But they weren't afraid to step up, do their job, and say, hey, guess who's not doing their job? You aren't. That was just their way of celebrating their accomplishments, in my opinion. I think Jerry did the same by simply scoring that touchdown and smiling at you, giving you a wink and walking away. We can take the time to scrutinize the actions of each player that has ever existed in any league, or we can simply appreciate every single thing that they did for us. Okay? Every single thing that they did for us. And when I say every single thing that they did for us, every catch, every hit, shoot, every practice. That's the end of the emotional part of this. Let's get ready. So, Jerry Rice had one MVP in the year of 1987. Randy Moss had no MVPs. Jerry Rice had one Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 23. Randy Moss had no Super Bowl MVPs. Now, the reason Randy Moss had no Super Bowl MVPs is Randy Moss didn't win any Super Bowls. The one year, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. The one year Randy Moss could have maybe possibly gotten a ring. I'm sure many people know. Congratulations to the Giants. But he had a shot. It didn't happen. It was one of the greatest seasons in NFL history, and we still didn't win. Go Patriots. So that would explain why Randy Moss has no Super Bowl MVPs. He never won a Super Bowl. However, Jerry Rice has three Super Bowl rings. So I understand. I get why some people, oh yeah, they don't add up. I get it. He's the GOAT, clearly. Rice. So let's talk about appearances, though. So we understand who won, but Jerry went to the Super Bowl 4 times. He won 3 of 4 times. If you don't consider that a GOAT, I don't know what is. However, Randy made it to the Super Bowl twice. Got right there. I kind of only really feel like it was once where it was really should have been guaranteed, but again, I can make that a whole episode. So I won't. So after Randy Moss's 2 Super Bowl appearances, Jerry Rice's 4 Super Bowl appearances, you ask yourself, okay, so how did the league feel about these guys, right? What were the votes like, the voties? What were the votes like? What was the voting like from the coaches and players, or excuse me, coaches and media and coaching staff around the league? Well, here's a way to tell. Pro Bowl selections, right? Jerry Rice was voted into the Pro Bowl 13 times. Jerry Rice was voted into the Pro Bowl 13 times. Randy Moss was voted into the Pro Bowl 6 times. Randy Moss was voted into the Pro Bowl 6 times. So, what is it? First team all player for NFL all sorry, I'm getting a little twisted here. NFL first team, Jerry Rice was voted in 10 times. Randy Moss was voted to the NFL first team all player 6 times. No, I apologize. 4 times. Randy Moss was voted to the first team all player 4 times. For the second team, Jerry was voted in twice, and Randy did not get voted into the second team ever. None at all. Randy Moss also was never the receiving yard leader for the NFL, not 1 year in his career. However, let's talk about Jerry. Jerry Rice was the receiving yards leader for the NFL on 6 separate occasions. Adding that with being the leader in total receptions for 2 seasons, that's Jerry Rice. Randy Moss neither led the league in receptions nor receiving yards. Just is what it is. However, although Randy Moss never led the league in receptions or reception yards, on 5 separate occasions, Randy Moss led the league in reception for touchdowns. In receptions for touchdowns. So while Randy never had the most yards, while Randy never had the most catches, there were 5 different years where Randy had the most touchdowns because of a catch he made. And again, if you saw the way he could catch a ball, listen, he was just amazing. Excuse me. A little excited here. When you watch some stuff, it's almost hard not to get excited when you discuss it. This is why I understand where emotion comes from when we discuss sports. However, the numbers say much more than I ever could. It's just kind of hard to compete with them. So Jerry Rice led the league in touchdown receptions on 6 separate occasions. So Randy Moss led the league in touchdown receptions 5 years, whereas Jerry Rice led the league in touchdown receptions 6 years. Jerry Rice was voted twice to be the offensive player of the year in the NFL. Randy Moss never had that accolade. He was never awarded with that. Now, before I move on, I want to make it very clear. If I were to name all of the different awards and accomplishments of these 2 gentlemen, I would probably double the average time of my episodes, which isn't a bad thing, but some information doesn't always lend to just show you how great a player is. Some information can be a bit overkill. Now, as I go through the rest of these stats, you'll understand possibly or plausibly what I mean when I say that. Let's get into it. So for the statistics section, we're going to begin with the total amount of games played. Now, keep in mind, Randy played 14 years. Jerry played 20 years. Now, in my humble opinion, with the NFL working the way it does, let's actually drop that to maybe 18 and 12. 17 and 11, something around there, because it's very rare, especially receivers or anybody. You don't really just come into the NFL making a huge impact. Everybody's not Pat Mahomes, and he didn't really, I mean, he made a good impact, but there's no but, yeah. But it's usually there's usually a lot of defensive players from what I've always seen that come in really young and make huge impacts. A lot of offensive players, give them a year or two. Most of your offensive players, give them a year or two, and watch out now. So, and don't quote me. That is simply my opinion. That's not quite as emotional as some other things that I could say. So simply lending that as I move forward through these numbers, which is what we're here for. So the statistics for Jerry Rice begin as so. Jerry Rice played 303 games in the NFL with a total of 1,549 receptions for a total of 22,895 yards. Jerry Rice averaged 14.8 yards per reception, had a total of 197 touchdowns in his career. He had an average of 5.1 receptions per game with an average of 75.6 yards per game. In his career of 303 games, Jerry Rice fumbled the ball 27 times. 27 fumbles for Jerry Rice. Now, if we put 27 fumbles right next to 1,549 receptions, you only drop to 1,522 receptions. I don't think that's anything to bat an eye at or to really be sad about. I did not go to the drop pass statistic, whether it was in efficiency, number of drops, or anything of that nature. Reason being, I am not here to tear anyone down with the numbers. I am simply here to lift up with the numbers. Some numbers can be a little bit tricky. So let's not discuss drops. If we were talking defenders, we would have no problem discussing deflections or cause drops if I could find that as I do my research. So in the statistic category, we now have Randy Moss. Randy Moss played a total of 218 games in his NFL career with a total of 902 receptions for a total of 15,292 yards. Randy Moss averaged a total of 15.6 yards per reception and had a total of 156 touchdowns in his career. Randy Moss averaged 4.5 receptions per game with an average of 70.1 yards per game. In Randy Moss's 218 NFL games, he fumbled the ball 16 times. 16 times. Now, to my recollection, a lot of Randy's catches were in the end zone or right at the end zone. Straddling the sideline, he'd catch the ball that was pretty much thrown out of bounds already. So if you ask me, the reason Randy wouldn't have as many fumbles is if he fumbled or if he dropped the ball, he was probably already on the sideline or it was already considered a catch in the end zone. That is not a disclaimer. Jerry played more years than Randy. So having more fumbles or having more of any stat just makes sense. But just to bring a little clarity to, these are receivers. Both of these were thinner guys. I don't think either of them were considered heavier or more of your brute type of receivers. Neither of them had a Steve Smith type of a game. But I will say, Jerry was a route runner. I wasn't born when he was drafted. However, I saw plenty, got to look back at a whole lot of great film on Jerry Rice, and he was a route runner. He was a route runner. I mean, his ability to zip on you was just I don't think I don't think anyone can compare. Even in today's game, I'm not sure. So when you think of a Jerry Rice and 27 fumbles, okay. I mean, as fast as he's moving, if somebody's going to hit him at some point, he's going to drop that thing, right? But again, with Randy, 16 fumbles seems a little low, but again, not just the least amount, the lower amount of years. Dude was huge, 6'4", 215, hands like Goliath, former basketball player on top of that. So he was leaping over these guys, you know. Think Tony Gonzalez. Well, no, Tony was heavy. Don't quote me on that. But he was noted as a guy who wasn't afraid to leap into the air and expose his mid section in his body to make a catch. That is what I'm getting at. That is pretty much also who Randy Moss was, except again, Randy was just known for leaping over guys, catching almost impossible passes, and doing it with style. Jerry did everything else with style, but those are the things that I believe Randy did with style. Now, to me, and anyone who's tuned in before, you know what's coming. We get into big boy time. We get into the seasons, not the season, but the seasons. Right now, we're getting to the playoffs. The playoffs are the bread and butter. What do they say? Say it all the time. Playoffs is when the men come to play. It's when the big boys come. It's when the big guns come out. It's when. So what I'm thinking is, we're not going to cover playoffs. I'm joking. What I'm thinking is when playoffs come, especially for a receiver, it's not as dependent upon them to per se make sure that the play is called for them, but it is 1,000% on them to locate and bring in that ball during the playoffs. I can remember watching NFL games when I was younger, of course, right? Watching them today, it still happens, but I can remember watching NFL games when I was younger, and in the playoffs, it just seemed like you saw more Hail Marys. It seemed like you saw more plays that maybe in the season you didn't get as many of. Maybe a flea flicker, which was very, very rare. It's not as common as it is today. But in the playoffs, you would see some stuff come out. And what I can always say about an NFL playoff game is, you know, by the end of that game, either your favorite guy, that guy that you know, that guy that you knew was going to show out, he showed out, boy. Or you discovered a new guy that was going to show out. And I can just remember looking back at some or thinking back to some NFL playoff games where you basically saw a veteran kind of on his way out and a new guy on his way in. These two gentlemen, I never saw this from them in the playoffs. That's why I told that story. As I said at the top, these athletes were great. These are the greatest receivers, top 3, top 5, you know, top 3, 1 and 2 type business. So playoffs isn't going to slow down. Just wanted to make sure you put on your seatbelt because we're about to get into it. Now, for the playoffs, Jerry Rice made 15 playoff appearances for the playoffs. Jerry Rice made 15 playoff appearances. Randy Moss made 7 playoff appearances. Now, again, this is no slight. The lower number is no slight. An accomplishment is an accomplishment. So, in Jerry's 20 seasons, 15 of those, he made it to the playoffs. In Randy's 14 seasons, in 7 of those, he made it to the playoffs. Again, when you are a receiver, a lot of this is contingent upon a play being called for you and the QB getting it in your vicinity for you to do your job. So how many games did these gentlemen play? Well, Jerry Rice had a total of 29 playoff games he played. In those 29 games, Jerry Rice had 151 receptions for 2,245 yards and averaged 14.9 yards per reception. While averaging 14.9 yards per reception, Jerry Rice also had a total of 22 playoff touchdowns. For every for every game, Jerry Rice averaged 5.2 receptions. And for every yard, Jerry Rice averaged, for every game, Jerry Rice averaged 77.4 yards. Let me give you that again. For every game, Jerry Rice averaged 5.2 receptions. And for every game, Jerry Rice averaged 77.4 yards. Now, I'm going to go back to the season stats just to give you an idea of what I mean when I say guys show up, they do what they're supposed to, and they do it at an exponential rate. After you've played an entire season, most people, the average player, not your superstars, not your guys that I'm typically covering, most guys, I'm not going to say they crumble, but their contribution declines. Jerry Rice's contribution stayed right on par. And it stayed right on par so much so that it got him some rings with the team, of course, but it was a successful bout, basically. Now, I am still going to cover fumbles. In Jerry Rice's 29 playoff game career, he fumbled the ball 3 times. So those 3 fumbles out of that 151 receptions, we are still at 148 receptions for Jerry Rice in the playoffs. Who's complaining? Not I, Popeye. Not I. Now, when we move over to Randy, we're going to move on over to Randy. Randy Moss, again, had 7 playoff appearances. In his 7 playoff appearances, he played a total of 15 games for a total of 54 receptions. With those 54 receptions, Randy Moss totaled 977 yards. Now, this is where it got really good for me. Randy Moss didn't stay on par when playoffs came. He ticked it up. They gave him a few more throws, and he ticked it up. So, Randy Moss averaged in his 15 playoff games 18.1 yards per reception to gain a total of 10 touchdowns for his playoff career. Randy Moss averaged 3.6 receptions per game. So I guess that takes me back to his 18 yards per catch in the playoffs. He did not get thrown to more in the playoffs. Now, the question again, I did not cover drops. So the question is, did he drop it, or was it simply not thrown his way? That is a great question that we will not be answering today. Randy Moss had, for every game, 65.1 yards averaged. And in his playoff career, Randy Moss had 0 fumbles in his 15-game playoff career. Now, again, rewind a little bit, hear my explanation or my understanding of what I think could have been part of why Randy Moss's fumble number isn't quite what some may think it should be. And when I say what some may think it should be, Randy typically went up to catch in packs. He was jumping over 2-3 guys sometimes, jumping over an entire team if he had to, or at least he tried to. Because of that, I can understand why because I was a bit surprised. I definitely expected Randy Moss to have a few more fumbles, or at least be a little more on par with fumbles with Jerry Rice, although Jerry played more years, just based on the type of catches I remember Randy making. But again, when your entire hand can wrap around the football, pretty much touch finger to finger, you're not dropping many of those, right? So within all of that, what I have decided to do is, before I give you their best years, I'm going to make a little light of it, right? So what I see, in a way I understand, I watched a little bit of Jerry as I was younger. I watched plenty of Randy. I think I watched pretty much Randy Moss's entire career because I really delved into football around 98, 99 when he was in Minnesota. And I love to watch defenders. He was one of the very few offensive guys I watched. So what I'm going to say is what I remember seeing out of Jerry Rice and what I saw in the highlights of Jerry Rice, when you look back at what Jerry accomplished, and then you look at Randy. Now, there's no possible way that Randy did not watch Jerry Rice. He clearly watched Jerry Rice. He didn't have Jerry's feet, but it seemed like he had Jerry's understanding of this is what I'm good at. This is what's going to happen. Good luck to the guy on the other side of the ball. Hey, I'm going to tell you what my route is. You're not going to stop me. And I think within that, you had a 1A, 1B type of a situation. I really think that's what happened. I think that Randy looked up to Jerry so much so that it was like, hey, I got to be on the list with this guy. I have to make it somewhere near what this guy has accomplished just because he's considered the greatest of all time. I want to be the greatest of all time, or I want to be in that vein. And if you get a chance, go ahead and look at a discussion that those two had during the, I think it was the Madden 100 all-time team discussion. And when they discuss each other and who's greater in the Hall of Fame thing, it's just amazing. The relationship, the camaraderie, it shows to me that you didn't just have, and again, this is an emotional base. This is just what I saw or what I've seen. You have these guys, and this is why I do this. This is why I cover the numbers. This is why I am so into the numbers. The numbers help me understand the respect that these guys have for each other after it's all over. If you sit and you watch these two gentlemen, Randy Moss and Jerry Rice, have a discussion, it's like a uncle and a nephew, like that's your favorite nephew kind of situation. Like, I would give that kid the world if he asked me for it, almost, right? And I am just glad that we have had the time and had the opportunity to enjoy that and to watch that. Now, coming up are the best season stats. What year did they have the best what, right? Kind of one of my favorite parts, just because it's like, whoa, you did that in 1 year? Like that. Sometimes it's one game or, but sometimes you're really like, that's amazing. How many other players have done that? And you got to go look up something else in the middle of researching for your show, right? So, best season stats. I'm going to start with Randy Moss on this one. Randy Moss played a full season in 2012. I know it is not the only full season he played. However, it is the what was listed as his top season as far as most games played. Not sure why. Maybe it's because I think that was his last year. I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not sure why. That's just what was listed. Now, Jerry Rice, however. So Randy Moss played 16 games. We all know that the NFL is a 17-week season, 16 games in a season. However, you can play 17 games in a season. Jerry Rice did. And there's been a few other players that did too. Like I said, some things it's going to make you look up. Jerry Rice played 17 games in one season in the season of 2004. Bit of explanation for anyone who doesn't understand. You can play 17 games in an NFL season if you were traded before your team, the first team you were on deadline, and after the other team's deadline. So you'll end up playing all 17 weeks because you'll miss both. Before the first team's bye week and before the second team and after the second team's bye week. So if you're traded from a team before their bye week and after the other team's bye week, you can totally miss a bye week and play 17 games in one season. That is what Jerry Rice did in 2004 when he was traded. Games started in 2002. Jerry Rice started all 16 games. In 2009, Randy Moss started all 16 games. Again, that is not the only season, but it is what was listed. Reception years. Now, who thinks these are going to be same? Nah, not happening, bud. So, Randy Moss in 2003 had 111 receptions in 1 year. Jerry Rice in 1995 had 122 receptions in one single season. In 1995, Jerry Rice also had 1,848 yards, to go with his 122 receptions, while Randy Moss in 2003 had 1,632 yards to go with his 111 receptions in the year of 2003. So as we see, the years that they had the most receptions are synonymous with the years that they had the most yards. Is that always the case? I don't think so. However, that is the case today. So, yards per reception. This got interesting in my opinion because it was a lot closer than I really expected it to be. So, yards per reception for Jerry Rice in 1988, Jerry Rice had 20.4 yards for every reception. In 1998, Randy Moss had 19 yards for every reception. That was Randy Moss's rookie year. Shout out to Dante Culpepper. Receiving touchdowns. In 1987, Jerry Rice had 22 receiving touchdowns. And in 2007, Randy Moss had 23 receiving touchdowns. These guys were amazing. If you do the math, that means about half the season for both of these guys, they had at least 2 touchdowns per game. Nuts. So when we move on down from that touchdown list, this is what I liked. I was so eager to see this one. And the person I thought was going to win did not win. I was almost contingent on making the entire thing based on who had the longest reception of their career, right? Who had the longest reception? Now, again, if you watched both play, Randy was kind of like your home run hitter, even though I feel like he probably could have got a few more receptions some games, but he was your home run hitter for sure. If you needed to go up top, Randy was your guy. Not your guy, he was your guy. And in 1988, Jerry Rice had his longest reception for 96 yards for one single reception by Jerry Rice. 1988. That is insane. And I still, even after finding that out, I was still like, oh, Randy probably has a 97, 98 somewhere. I was incorrect. And this is why we don't base things on emotion, and we go find the facts and we bring the numbers to you. The hard hitting facts, the numbers, I bring them to you. So in 2004, Randy Moss had his longest reception of his career for 82 yards. That's right. Randy Moss's longest reception of his entire career was 82 yards. 14 yards shy of Jerry Rice's 96 yard longest reception. And if I'm being honest, about 16 lower than I assumed. And that's why we don't make assumptions, ladies and gentlemen. I bow. So after we get through those longest reception, I'm going to skip on. And before I get to our yards per game for receiving and receptions per game as far as the max, I want to get to one that I thought was really cool, simply because of my interest in them earlier in the segment, simply because of my interest in them as I was looking through it. Again, Jerry Rice had a total of 27 fumbles for his career. And Jerry Rice had a total of 16 fumbles for his career. However, in their best seasons, Jerry Rice in 2004 had 0 fumbles. Okay. And Randy Moss in 2010 had 0 fumbles. That should not be a surprise. But again, when you look at the numbers, you start thinking to yourself, well, okay, these guys probably dropped the ball at least once every year then, right? There were some seasons they did not. Now, let's get to receptions Receptions per game. What was the highest number of receptions per game in a season for these guys? So Jerry Rice in 1995 averaged 7.6 receptions per game, not targets, actual catches. 7.6 receptions per game. In 2003, Randy Moss averaged 6.9 receptions per game. Again, these are not targets. This is not how many times they were thrown at in a game. This is how many times they caught the ball in a game. Which takes me to receiving yards per game. In 1995, Jerry Rice had 115.5 receiving yards for every single game he played in the year of 1995. Where Randy Moss in the year of 2003 had 102 yards for every single NFL game he played in on average. So that's not really, but it is. So ask yourself a question. If you look at Jerry Rice and you look at Randy Moss and you needed a receiver to take to the Super Bowl today, considering what type of a team you have, that's up to you. Who would you choose and why? Don't worry about why you wouldn't choose the other person. I think you would take the other person if it were anyone else that we're going up against other than the person you choose. But do ask yourself, which of these gentlemen would you take and in which situation would they thrive the most? If it's fourth quarter, I'm down. I need a big one. But maybe they have a shutdown corner and a guy who plays great man coming out the safety helping. I'm not sure if Jerry's going to be the best option for that because he's going to be double teamed. Again, I'm sure Jerry could beat a double team. Not a question. But if I know for a fact you're double teaming, I'm down. Let's call it third down. I might need Randy. I mean, I might watch Jerry swivel around you a little bit, but I might need Randy, especially depending on my quarterback. If my quarterback can get it up, get it out there, throw that bomb, throw the missile, right? Hail Mary. I might be throwing it to the 6'4", 215 leaper. But if I am within 20 and I could throw, say, a quick slant or something like that, just something that's going to take them across fast, something quick, and 8 times out of 10, I think I'm still going to get that touchdown. It's really up to the scheme you're running, right? Who knows? I could have just said a whole bunch of stuff that nobody agrees with as far as which player you would take. However, what I will say is this. What I will conclude with is this. Neither of these gentlemen have the type of numbers where you're going to leave them on the board for your opponent to pick. It's just not, these aren't those kind of guys. So if you had to throw away another player in order to take both of them, I'm sure you would. If you had to throw away 2 players just to get the other one with the one you chose, I'm sure you would. That is my conclusion, that both of these players are so great that they are valuable in any system you put them in. This is If Numbers Could Talk. My name is KEILYN. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you tuning in. Please take the time to venture over to our website, thinkering.space. Visit us on all of our socials, Facebook, Instagram. We are there as Thinkering Talks Podcast, the Exofathom Podcast, Plank Talks with Joe, and If Numbers Could Talk. When you go over to our website, you'll be able to find all of our streaming services that we are on for audio only, such as Spotify, the Play Store, and iTunes, Stitcher as well. And when you do that, do me a favor. Stay loving to yourself and those around you. I appreciate your time. Have a great night.